Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. First of all, there's a new Substack up at theamericanclassroom.substack.com. Feel free and bounce over there and check it out if you're interested. And I wanted to make mention of this because, again, when I put together a Substack article, I'm not necessarily even putting it together even for me or even for the people who subscribe to, of course, this podcast or even the Substack channel itself. It's basically being written in some cases for you to move to other people. So that if you know somebody, again, who's defending the Department of Education, or they're defending, again, or just not knowledgeable, I should say, on certain issues or particular issues, all I'm doing is putting together a particular article in a certain way to make it a little bit more serious, I guess, so that you can move it again to somebody who might not be thinking about it in this particular way. And again, I certainly kick it up a notch, I think, of course, by bringing in plenty of evidence and enough facts that the Department of Education, again, has been involved in fraud, deception, child abuse, and murder. And this should not be a surprise to anybody who listens to this show. But there are many people out there who still believe that the Department of Education serves the needs of children. Again, the facts couldn't be further from the truth. They clearly don't. And as I've said before, and as you're well aware, in fact, I finally heard read that John Rich, the country music singer on Truth, I believe it was, if not X, he finally ended up saying something like, wow, I can't wait for people to figure out that all of this lost money has everything to do with child trafficking. Yeah, absolutely. I've been saying that for a very long time. That's the end game. That's the end goal of course, what a lot of this has to do with. Because again, moving children around is far more profitable than even moving guns and drugs around combined. So that's where a great deal of this money is going, and you'd better believe that the Federal Department of Education has a great deal to do with that, because they do. Not to mention, of course, all of the fraud that's come out regarding the Department of Defense, all of the money, of course, that's gone to the media apparatus and different media outlets in order to socially engineer the public and openly admit this. This right here is part of the details that, your average American just isn't paying attention to. They've been brainwashed, and they're openly admitting that this is the case. Now, it's not they, the organizations, of course, that are admitting it, but it's DOGE, and it's the military, and it's the individuals who are behind these revelations and these so-called audits. That's the real problem here. But again, your average American isn't grasping this. They wouldn't send their children, again, as I've said a million times, said it plenty in the last episode, they wouldn't be sending their children to school environments if they knew what those school environments were really doing and what the money that they receive is really tied into. So again, I go through a number of different points in that particular Substack, but please feel free and move that around if you're interested, even if you want to shit post with it and move it to different Facebook groups, or again, move it to your local school boards and just, I don't know, bother them with it and say, hey, are you aware of this? And just, shoot them an email or get on social media and toss it their way. You can do that too, just to make them angry. Why not? Again, I've got more on the education landscape that I'm going to bring up later. In fact, a giant countdown clock regarding DEI and the FDOE putting out a memo basically saying you better get rid of everything DEI or else you're not going to receive any more federal funding. Again, I'll read through that entire memo from the Federal Department of Education here in a little bit, and you can take a pretty good guess, I think, as to what school districts across the entire United States are going to do in regards to this memo. I mean, the queers are going to dig in like ticks. They're going to do whatever they have to do to hide the material any way that they can, rename the material. Again, I've been over all of this before, and you're well aware of this, but here we are in crunch time. And this right here is where everybody's going to start seeing this. They're going to change the names diversity, equity, and inclusion in their school districts. They're going to double down on having the policy, just renaming it. And that, of course, will be one of the things that takes place. But again, I'll cover some more of that a little bit later. Let me start here, though, just sort of geopolitically. This continues to shock me, and it's remarkably troublesome. But you have a great deal of senators who are meeting with Zelensky right now overseas. And at the exact same time, you have on the opposite end of that coin, you have Donald Trump, the king of Saudi Arabia and the prince, as it were, along with Vladimir Putin, about to meet in Saudi Arabia. me, frankly, I like the fact that those three guys are meeting and that they're not allowing Zelensky to show up. The problem, of course, is that with Zelensky, and it's probably not a huge problem, it's very revealing, and the guilty are showing their hand here. But you have United States senators on both sides of the so-called aisle meeting with Zelensky. In fact, it's a relatively large list here, and anybody can see the video of this. Again, I put it up on my Gab page, and it's bouncing around too. But you have Lindsey Graham, so-called Republican, of course, from South Carolina. He's a complete tool and a total war hawk. You have John Cornyn from Texas. You have Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island. Tom Tillis from North Carolina. Janine Shaheen from New Hampshire. Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. Adam Schiff from California. Andy Kim from New Jersey. Mark Warner. Again, most of these are Democrats. Let's see, Mark Warner from Virginia. You have Michael Bennett from Colorado. You have Chris Coons from Delaware. Brian Shantz from Hawaii. Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, and Elisa Slotnick from Michigan. Again, they're all in the same room, and they're all looking at Zelensky and going, just hang in there and we'll get you what you need and we're on your side. These people are traitors. They're either remarkably stupid or they're actually allowed by law to meet with Zelensky, even though the President of the United States and the vast majority of our country doesn't like Zelensky and is clearly not our ally. We're not interested in him. We're not interested in his country. We're interested in, of course, all of the fraud going away and any murder, of course, that's been taking place where obviously they've been scooping up their own citizens off of the street and then throwing them out into a wooded area to get slaughtered. Again, we aren't interested in that. But these senators show up, shake his hand, say that we need to get him all the weapons that we need to get him and all the money that we need to get him. And these individuals, again, are directly tied to this money laundering that's been taking place this whole time. I continue to be surprised that they aren't being detained, immediately arrested and hung for treason. Unless, of course, again, they're lawfully allowed to do what they're doing. I really don't know. Again, I'm not an international lawyer. I have no idea, but it seems like treason and sedition to me because they're directly working with an individual and a country that is going against what our country wants. So that clearly makes these individuals disloyal to our country. That should go without saying. But at the same time, I can't believe that they're allowed to do this. It just couldn't be more obvious for anybody who actually voted for them. Or, of course, these individuals were selected because they're clearly the worst of the worst. But I don't think it could be more obvious for the people who allegedly voted for them that these individuals do not have their best interests as Americans at heart. This is where a great deal of this USAID money has been going. It's been going overseas. It's been laundered. And these individuals are on the forefront of the location and shaking hands with the guy who's been laundering this money and been stealing this money, and then, of course, comes back to us, the well, and continues to ask for it. I just can't believe that these individuals are getting away with this. Why have we not seen someone be arrested yet? This continues to be one of the largest problems here in our country, is we're not actually seeing anybody get arrested. So again, any summit, of course, here in the future, in the near future here, could be even this week, that takes place between Trump and Putin and the King of Saudi Arabia, I think it's going to be fantastic because, again, it's a clear show of force. That's, I think, number one. And number two, they're clearly edging out Ukraine and any United States senator who's siding with Ukraine, which, again, should show that they are, in fact, the traitors. And at the exact same time, it's edging out NATO and the European Union because they're not invited to that summit either. Again, take J.D. Vance real quick. He was over there and he gave a speech, I believe, certainly to a room full of Germans and other individuals who are now full-blown communists, which is the exact opposite of what Adolf Hitler wanted, but yet here we are. And then, of course, after his speech, where he's basically saying, hey, you're all communists, that's not cool, don't do that anymore because nobody likes you, they all come back to the microphone and they basically say, go mind your own business, J.D. Vance, no one cares what you think. Me personally, I think that the European Union is next on the chopping block. This has to be done away with. Europe has to wake up. They have to wake up, and they can't sit around and wait for, again, some next election, which of course is going to be controlled by the exact same side under the illusion of being a different side, to then only have Europeans' rights be stripped from them even more, which of course causes the European Union to come back in and strangle them even more and strip more of their rights and more of their money. These global and country-wide and continent-wide organizations have got to be destroyed. That's why, again, in the last episode, I brought up Vance's speech in France. I thought that was very well done, again, when it came to the business of AI, but even so, I think the bad guys are afraid of good guys using AI against them, and certainly using it as a weapon for the people against government. Because if good guys used it against government, what kind of fraud and crimes would they find? They would find endless fraud and endless crimes, just like what's going on in our country right now. Again, when it comes to artificial intelligence, I don't know the long-term plan. I really don't. And I fully understand how bad it could possibly get, and I, of course, am not for that. I don't know anybody who really is who has a brain. But at the same time, like I said in the last episode, if it is a weapon that was hijacked by the good guys in order to be shown and used in a good way to root out fraud and illegality, specifically within government, then why couldn't that be replicated and then shared with other countries to do the same? We know that those countries would then, of course, backtrack on the use of AI in that direction. But I don't know. It's certainly complicated, and I'm not going to pretend to know all the ins and outs, but I firmly believe that there's far more going on here than what meets the eye. That's essentially my 2 cents on the whole thing. With that said, let me mention this also. Amazing Polly has taken back to making some videos here on BitChute and Odyssey. And she makes a really good point when she's highlighting all of the relationship connections that these individuals have, in particular what she might refer to as sort of the Rumble crowd, or, this Rumble crew that exists. Many of us, of course, would refer to it as ConINC, and we've been doing that for quite some time, even in Amazing Polly's hiatus for quite some time when it came to making videos. I mean, we were calling these individuals out because it's rather easy to do. All you have to do is pay attention to what they're not bringing up and what they're not saying. For example, all of the USAID stuff and all of the DOGE talk, and yet none of them are talking about child trafficking, rape, and murder of children. They're not bringing any of that up. They're not bringing up the fact that any of these organizations were engaging in all of those things, including politicians, and that politicians were receiving that blood money as a kickback. They're staying away from it, of course, and they're also staying away, of course, from the Jewish lobby aspect of everything. Because one of the things I think that people have to keep in mind is that anytime you hear the word terrorist, or you hear the word, again, Middle Eastern terrorist or foreign terrorist, the fact is it's the Jewish lobby that's funding them. That's one of the big points here. Case in point, just very quickly, is again another side note, there was a busload of Palestinians that was released just the other day. Again, some of them looked awful, but these were Israeli prisoners. So again, this idea that Hamas, quote unquote, or Palestinians were taking Jewish prisoners, and that they were the only ones taking Jewish prisoners, is absurd. Why were Israelis taking prisoners? Why were they taking prisoners and taking innocent people as prisoners? Notice how, again, the news typically doesn't bring that up, certainly not individuals on the right. Donald Trump brought it up, which is good, because, again, that highlights that both sides can be guilty of very horrible things. But even so, this is one of the aspects that the so-called ConINC Rumble crowd just aren't bringing up. So one of the points that she makes in her last video, which again is a valid point, is that not only do these individuals, again, cross-promote one another, and they have all of these relationship connections that seem remarkably odd, but if you actually get on their shows and you start watching and listening to their shows, they're not saying anything different from one person to the next. I mean, Tucker Carlson has on some different people from time to time and brings up some rather serious issues. But if you deviate from him and you start listening to people like Kimberly Guilfoyle or even Don Jr. or whatever else, you're never going to hear the name Jew, and you're never going to hear Jewish lobby, and you're not going to hear a whole lot about Mossad and all of that control over child trafficking, rape, murder, money laundering, extortion, etc., etc. It's not going to be brought up. It just won't. And therein lies, again, one of the massive problems. They are gatekeepers. And then that brings in the question, why? Why is it that they're cross-promoting? Why is it that they are engaging in this narrative direction or this narrative control, so to speak, where a story comes out and then all of a sudden a Weinstein ends up showing up on Joe Rogan's show and a Mike Benz ends up showing up on somebody else's show? And then Mike Benz goes over to Joe Rogan and goes, oh my gosh, look at all this wasteful spending. Well, Mike Benz is Jewish, like I've said before, and he's openly admitted it on X, but is he bringing up child trafficking, rape, murder of children? Is he bringing any of this up? The Mossad connection, the CIA connection. He's only going so deep, and all of these individuals, again, are only going so deep. Because if you mention the Jays, well, you get kicked off, or they shut each other up, or they laugh it off, and then it's on to the next subject. This is a massive problem. And if these individuals, again, are attempting to basically be the new Fox News or the new wing of the conservative media outlet, whereas in the past, people, again, who were conservatives would watch Fox News and people who were not would watch everything else. We're watching the destruction, of course, of Fox News and the typical media apparatus that exists on the old TV. But if this gang of Rumble bros and gals is all seeking to control the same narrative of what Americans think, or they think that they're controlling what Americans are thinking about, that's a big problem. You know, it's one of those things that ties into the problem with X as a platform, because X is associated with all of this, of course. If you get on X and you try to post a BitChute channel or a BitChute link, like I did with Saturday night's war video, it immediately popped up for the first time ever. A window popped up and said, sorry, we can't upload that BitChute link. Now, it didn't say BitChute, but either way, it said we can't upload that link. And I went, well, that's interesting. So I bounced over to Rumble, my channel on Rumble, took the exact same Rumble link for the exact same war video, uploaded it, no problem. X didn't have a problem with it. So again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here and being remarkably repetitive, but X is not a free speech platform. Rumble most certainly shadow bans individuals and keeps people from seeing particular videos that may be of interest, based on keywords that should show up in someone's algorithm, based on other things that they've watched and seen. But at the same time, people who actually know the real truth about real history and XYZ are never going to make their way onto these other people's shows. Because these, again, individuals are all gatekeepers. They're all playing for the exact same team. And they're receiving kickbacks because most of them are tied in with the exact same promo codes and the exact same companies that are funding them. That's usually the dead giveaway too. That, of course, all of them are on the same team. It's all wellness company stuff. Hey, we have a new sponsor. Here's how you can get ivermectin and this, that, and the other. We don't need their promo codes to get ivermectin. You can get ivermectin off of my website, and all I do is link at least 5 places where you can get it if you want to get it. But you don't need to go through, Don Jr.'s Rumble channel and use his promo code to get it from some other party, where he again is receiving kickbacks for using his promo code. It's making money, and I get it. They're money makers and they care about making money, and they're certainly corporatizing the media outlet and news, so to speak, and certainly whatever narrative control they're engaging in. They're doing all of that because that's what the mainstream media does. But we know that 2 wrongs don't make a right. And just because they're doing it, even though all of them have plenty of money, the sad part is that they seem like they can't get enough of it. And they have no problem, again, gaslighting individuals and only letting the conversation go so far before God knows what happens. The actual truth gets told on any of their platforms. But there's just too many nefarious ties. There's too many very odd connections. Again, I understand business from a very basic standpoint. When business is so large and you're working on such a grand scale, it's inevitable that you're going to be associated with individuals that are not that good. And by not that good, I don't mean not good at business necessarily. I just mean not good people. So, yeah, there's a lot of dirty people on the so-called alternative media outlet of things. and in that particular realm. But I don't know. It doesn't make them any better than Fox News. They're just not called Fox News. Again, I sat down and I tried to watch. I mean, I quite very hard tried to listen to Kimberly Guilfoyle's podcast, and I couldn't do it. I mean, she's, bless her heart, but I mean, she's looking into the camera and she's fixing her hair half the time when the person is trying to talk to her, and it's the old radio for TV kind of thing. I mean, it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but again, I don't watch Joe Rogan's podcast either because I'm just not that interested in it. He's been proven to be a gatekeeper as well. So I'm going to let this subject go here for now, but this is the problem, is that these individuals, again, certainly enough of them, were receiving kickbacks from USAID. Real America's Voice, of course, is another outlet that's out there that dominates the Rumble space. They have some very nefarious ties as well. I don't know. It's just dirty, and it really doesn't make them any different than Fox News. I mean, if you're going to be different than Fox News, then why would you not just be on the up and up and be so afraid to have Americans on your show who might know more about a particular subject than you, and at the exact same time invite them in and say, so what do you think about what's going on? And if a J-bomb gets dropped, you don't cut them off. I mean, again, it's been said on Tucker Carlson's show, and sometimes people get a little nervous and sometimes they don't, but we have to get past that. I've certainly gotten past that. I think a lot of people who listen to this show have gotten past that. Lord knows Stu Peters has, because that's all he talks about. But at the exact same time, look at the individuals on that whole Rumble space and what they're not bringing up. So we have to be the ones essentially to raise the tide. I'm not interested in the money. Those people are. I would be very shocked if the number of clicks and likes and shares and subscribes and followers that they have on all of that, those cross-promotional weirdos, the Weinsteins of the world, of course, and the Dan Bonginos and all of them, I would doubt that they actually have the followers that they think that they have or the clicks that they think that they have. If a small show like mine can be shadow banned and can be kicked off of YouTube and can also, of course, have clicks diminished when the clicks might be a little bit higher than what they look like, then why is it that a Dan Bongino can still exist on a YouTube space? Or anybody else who's in that sphere of influence on that so-called, alt-right media, that those individuals can still have a presence on YouTube and Rumble. I'm not whining because I don't want to be associated with those people. I don't want to be a part of that crowd. I like being where I am and doing what I'm doing here. Not to mention, of course, there's it's the constant illusion of there being a different voice with those people. I mean, it's openly been said now and openly come out that the Daily Wire owns Tim Pool and Charlie Kirk. They basically own TPUSA. So you have one Jewish organization who is paying two other Jewish organizations the same amount of money or whatever. They were all on the payroll, again, through the Jewish lobby and through the control apparatus of the so-called conservative alt-right, but now they're all on the exact same team again, under the exact same name, pretending to not be. They're just gaslighting people into believing that it's a different show, but they generally all agree and all say the same stuff over and over again, from platform to platform. So, I don't know. I think discernment is a big issue here, and this is something that everybody's going to have to continue to exercise for a great deal of time. Just because Donald Trump's back in office and there are some good things happening, it doesn't mean that bad people aren't still going to do bad stuff, and it doesn't mean that those bad people don't exist on the right. They certainly do. They exist on all sides. In fact, moving into education, let me mention this, because I linked this particular article at the end of the Substack article that I wrote last, and it was put together again by a guy who helps write for the Unlimited Hangout, which is Whitney Webb's particular publishing outlet. And again, I admire Whitney Webb greatly. There are certain elements of this war that I don't think that Whitney Webb has a grasp of, which is okay. And it's possible, again, that she might be aware of it, but I don't know how often she writes about it. Either way, in that particular article, which again was kind of a black-pilling article on, of course, the technocratic state and the corporate state, and how eliminating the Federal Department of Education would basically cause all of the individuals who work within the Federal Department of Education to just find new jobs in all of the other departments that already exist in government, and that those individuals would just end up going to work for those particular departments, like Health and Human Services, the Labor Department, Treasury, whatever. So, for example, if the FDOE is eliminated, which it will be eliminated, that's an inevitability. But once that happens, the individuals or the office that existed within the FDOE who is in charge of money, that those individuals, again, if they go over to the Labor Department or the Department of the Treasury or whatever it is, that those same people will work their way over to those departments, thereby bringing with them any corporate connection that they already have to other technocratic individuals and technology groups and whatever they may be, whether, again, they're domestic or foreign. And essentially, nothing will really change at the K-12 or university level because those individuals will still exist. They just won't exist within the Federal Department of Education. I think that that's not true in the slightest, as I, again, briefly said at the end of the article. The one constant in the field of education is that technology has largely been a massive failure. An absolute massive failure. It's been misused, it's been abused, it's created, again, data harvesting, data mining of students' information. And the funny part, of course, and the irony, is that with all of that technology implementation, specifically Google being the largest American technology group that exists within all American schools, that it's politicians who are screaming at the top of their lungs at Linda McMahon about the business of students having their information seized and how it's possible that all of these students' information will somehow be compromised because that's exactly what DOGE has done with the FDOE, thereby gaining control of all of these students' private information and their social security numbers and so on and so on. Again, the irony is palpable because that's what every American school has been doing. Every American school has been data harvesting and data mining all of this information from children, which immediately, of course, goes straight back to Google, which then goes back out to foreign countries, and China is just one of them. There are many that are all affiliated with Google. This information doesn't just stay in the United States. If anybody believes that, again, I have a bridge I'd like to sell you. That's just not the way it works. The younger a child is when they have a digital footprint, the worse it is for them in the long run. What the people at Unlimited Hangout and the guy who wrote that article don't understand is that's already been a failure in American schools, and endless parents already know that. They're already well aware of the trouble of everybody walking around with a Chromebook in their backpack on a constant basis from classroom to classroom. Again, I've brought up the local issues here with Google and Google's use and Google Calendar and IEPs and 504s and all of that personal information being widely accessible among anybody who has a password, an email, or access to the local school district, specifically if you're a staff member, a parent, or a student within the system. All of that information is out there. It's not a breach or a hack. It's school districts not knowing how to use the technology that they blindly accept, that they blindly adopt, because they're getting a financial kickback for adopting it. And then they have to spend more money on it in the long run because if it breaks, well, they have to re-up all of that money. Again, the local school district here paid something like $500,000. I think it was $500,000. It could have been less than that, but it was a great deal of money to basically re-up all of their Chromebooks. They said, well, they become obsolete after a certain number of years, and we just have to re-up them, and we have to get everybody new Chromebooks because this is the expectation, and we adopted this as a teaching platform and a learning platform and blah, blah, blah. What they don't understand is that the new technology that they receive has more tools, apps, and security devices on it. And when I say security, I'm using finger quotes. It's not really secure to anybody or for anybody. It's only secure and only certain that Google is going to have all of that student's information who possesses that Chromebook. It's that simple. If they have your username and your password, they have everything that they can access. Remember, just click on the terms of service button at the long list of that 200 million word terms of service contract, and then you can start using your piece of technology. So the technocratic state has already been a failure. This boils down to one thing and one thing only, which I've always said. People have to vote with their feet and decide whether or not they want to give all of that information willfully away to corporations or they don't. And the other aspect, too, is that the author of that article seemed to believe that the more you did away with public school, the more children would find their way into private and charter schools, which could more easily be controlled without federal oversight on technology use. Well, again, joke's on him, because he doesn't seem to understand that charter schools and private schools heavily rely on even more technology pieces than what the public school apparatus relies on. In fact, public schools and charter schools in many cases not only rely on them more, but as soon as one pops up, it's almost their prerogative as, again, a board of directors to immediately start adopting technology pieces and invite in companies to introduce technology pieces to their staff, administration, and students. And of course, where are they getting those ideas? Well, they're getting them from public schools. So again, it's not that there's more corporate control, so to speak, over private and charter schools. There's already corporate control over public schools. Look at all of them. They all share basically the same kinds of technology tools from one district to the next, almost regardless of the state that they live in and the state that they operate in. This is, again, why the home learning and homeschooling family is free from all of that by and large. Yes, you're still using technology pieces in order to send in work or, have certain work checked or whatever assignments are being done online and all of that. And I mean, that's rather obvious because we live in the digital age and there's more information on the internet than ever before. But when you're learning inside of the home, you're not receiving a device that is filtered through or even laundered through a school system. And it's not forced upon you. Like, you have to have a Chromebook. You have to log into this particular system. You have to do this. You have to do that. You don't have a choice. Again, that already exists at the public and private and charter school setting. All of that already exists. And again, as the author of that Unlimited Hangout article was essentially saying, is that this doesn't exist at the public level the way that it will exist at the private and charter level. He doesn't understand that there are no lines of division. They're all generally the same. It just continues to be a massive problem. So I don't think that the Federal Department of Education being eliminated, as I said at the end of the article, is certainly a bad thing. It's not. In fact, it could be not only one of the better things that takes place, but it will depend on whether or not the employees actually keep their jobs within the new departments, or those new individuals within those departments are given the job of then maintaining that particular, avenue of inquiry, so to speak, or business having to do with the dissemination of either technology pieces, information, money, whatever it may be, curriculum. Again, that's quite possible, but at the same time, this boils down to the states and what the states are going to be doing. So think of it this way. If you have a snake and you cut off the head, and the head slithers away into some other avenue, and then you have the body left, and you cut off the tail, so you have the head, the body, and the tail. The tail would be the NGOs and the three-letter agencies and even the think tanks that exist overseas. They're still going to want to do business in the field of education because they still want social engineering and social control and money. So instead of dealing with the body, they're just going to follow the head. And now that head is going to go closer to the state level. But see, even that's not new, because these think tanks and these organizations and tech companies have always directly gone after state officials and invited them to listen to their product and listen to their pitches and a number of other things. And they've done the exact same thing with local school districts themselves, certainly the larger ones. I mean, it may take a little longer for a massive think tank or an NGO to reach a small rural school district, but it's only a matter of time before they get touched by the evil hand also. So again, the broader point is this. The fight goes on regardless of whether the FDOE sticks around or it doesn't. And it's not going to stick around. Again, it was openly said in the Linda McMahon hearing, which I'm going to play some audio from here right now, is that they openly again discuss that with regularity that, well, since Donald Trump said, and he's made a mandate and openly spoken about getting rid of it, that what's going to happen with this and what's going to happen with that. Their concern as politicians, because they can't tell you the real concerns. The real concerns are the new departments that are going to take the scattered pieces of the FDOE aren't going to give those politicians their usual kickback. That's what they're really pissed about. They're not really angry about some special ed kid who they think is not going to have accommodations met for them. It's already law. No special ed kid's not going to have accommodations met for them, and if they don't, that's the school district's fault. It's got nothing to do with the FDOE being scattered to the breeze. One thing has nothing to do with the other. If it's law, then it has to be followed. If it's been told that it's no longer law or that law has been abolished, well, then you can't do that particular thing anymore. So that's not really the complication. That's just the political jargon and the political noise, rather, that you'll hear in any of these hearings. But let me get to this audio here very quickly, because there was a very unfortunate aspect of all of this, which I briefly mentioned in the last episode, but it got brought up among a great deal of the politicians there. And I'm going to play two pieces of audio. The first you're going to hear is, again, Senator Josh Hawley, who I'm not a fan of by any stretch. He's clearly owned by the Jewish lobby. This guy has to be blackmailed to the bone. Again, a Republican, so to speak, from Missouri. But he brings up the anti-Semitism. Old anti-Semitism, the ant that no one can seem to find because she doesn't really exist. Old anti-Semitism. So he brings this up again in the context of, we've seen more Jewish hate on college campuses than ever before. And yet the vast majority of people haven't even seen it. And if it has happened, it's been completely manufactured. I, of course, have spent a great deal of time on that. You're well aware of all of the lies associated with all of it. It's a giant money laundering scheme, essentially, and a way to continue to curry favor with the Jewish lobby. With that said, I have to hand it to Linda McMahon. She did openly say that, she agrees with particular things, but then she did say somewhere along the line that she just agrees with the Constitution and the law, and it applies to everybody, regardless of their race, religion, ethnicity, etc. That's really only anybody has to say when it comes to the whole anti-Semitism argument. And the simple fact, again, and you're going to hear the proof here because it comes from both sides of the aisle, is that this right here is the problem. This ownership of the Jewish lobby over elected officials or selected officials is really the much larger issue here, because it gets brought up from both Republicans and Democrats. And there was another Republican senator, again, who proposed a anti-Semitism commission. Mrs. McMahon, do you believe that we should have a anti-Semitism commission, and would you like to be a part of such commission? I mean, in the hearing, she can't say no. She could have. She could have looked at him and said, you know what, I don't see the need for an anti-Semitism commission, because if you don't have a commission for the discrimination of Christians or whites or any other race or ethnicity within government or on college campuses, then why should we just have one for one group of people? That would have been a more logical answer. But, I don't know if it was for the sake of brevity or just because she actually agrees with it or not. I mean, I really have no idea, but she just said, yes, that sounds fine, Senator. That sounds like something that could happen. And then, they moved on. And then, of course, a Democrat brought it up later, too. I also agree and would like to participate in such a commission. Again, these people who enjoy meetings for the sake of meetings when you already have the Constitution is really embarrassing. But this right here should show people who the real enemy is. And that's exactly why the whole Rumble crowd and ConINC are never going to bring any of this up, because they're paid by the Jewish lobby. So here's Senator Hawley and Linda McMahon's exchange very quickly. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Senator Hawley. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McMahon, thank you for being here. Nice to see you again. Let me just say this. The last 4 years have been, in many ways, absolutely hellacious for students on our college campuses. You had the last administration which issued federal rules, binding regulations that required our college campuses to put biological men into women's locker rooms. You've had multiple universities claiming the mandate, claiming the cover of the Biden administration, forcing women to accept biological men in women's sports. And so you've seen young woman after young woman denied basic safety in their changing facilities, for heaven's sake, basic safety in their dorm rooms, not able to play college sports. Now, I'm delighted that a federal court finally struck down this Biden administration rule back in January, just over a month ago. And President Trump issued a clear, strong, unequivocal executive order saying that Title IX will be enforced according to its terms, which is Title IX protects women's sports. It protects women on college campuses. No more men in women's locker rooms. This is a huge victory for common sense and the rule of law. My question to you is this. A number of universities, including some very prominent ones that love to call themselves elite, have said they're not going to follow that executive order. They're going to keep having men in women's locker rooms. They're going to try to get men in women's sports. What can be done to ensure that these colleges comply with the law and that women are safe on campus and that women are able to play sports without men interfering?
Well, certainly, I agree with you that I was very happy to see that those restrictions on Title IX vacated, so that we are really back to what Title IX was originally established to do, and that was to protect sexual discrimination. And women should feel safe in their locker rooms. They should feel safe in their spaces. They shouldn't have to be exposed to men undressing in front of them. I think I heard one person the other day say, well, the guys just should hold the shower curtain in front of them so that they aren't exposing themselves. I mean, really, that's just not what we should be doing. We want to make sure that Title IX, which is the law, is enforced. And we need to uphold that.
Will you investigate those universities that are not complying with Title IX, that are not complying with the president's executive order? These universities are absolutely getting federal funds from this department, the department that you're going to run if and when you are confirmed, and I believe you will be. Will you investigate those universities and give them an ultimatum? Either they need to comply with the law, they need to follow the law of Title IX, they need to follow the rules issued by this administration, your department, or no federal funding. I mean, will you make sure that the law is enforced?
Yes, we will make sure the law is enforced.
Very good. Let me ask you about...
I'm a teacher, and
The senator will suspend. The committee will come to order. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individual from the hearing room. Members of the audience are reminded that disruptions will not be permitted while the committee conducts its business. The senator will resume.
Don't worry, Ms. McMahon, it's me, it's not you. That effect. Let me ask you about something else that's happened on our campuses in the last 4 years, the wave of anti-Semitism that we've seen, particularly after October 7th with the attacks on Israel. Shameful attacks on Jewish students, Jewish American students, Jewish students from overseas. We have seen the most unbelievable pro-terrorist propaganda. And again, these universities taking federal money, getting federal funds, not protecting Jewish students, permitting encampments, permitting violence in some instances, attacks on students on their campuses. The president has issued an executive order on January the 29th on measures to combat anti-Semitism, and he directed the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights to open Title VI investigations into a number of universities, including Columbia, Berkeley, Northwestern. Will you enforce the law, Title VI to the hilt, and will you make sure that Jewish Americans are safe on our campuses, for heaven's sake, and these crazy students who are committing crimes, breaking windows, smashing into buildings, trapping Jewish students in libraries, will you make sure that this stops on our college campuses that are getting all of this federal tax money?
Absolutely, or face defunding of their monies.
Very good. And let me ask you about something else. For students who have come to this country on a student visa, and as you know, that's a lot of people on our college campuses. For students who are here on a student visa, who have threatened their fellow students, threatened Jewish students, who have supported terrorist organizations, who have broken our law by trespassing or vandalism or acts of violence against Jewish students, will you see that those students, that their visas are revoked and they are sent home and they're not allowed to stay on our campuses under cover of our laws, committing crimes and threatening our own students? Will you return some common sense to our campuses in this way?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Capitol Police are asked to remove the individual from their hearing room. I'm not sure it's going to matter, but I'm going to remind members of the audience that disruptions are not to be permitted while the committee conducts its business. Please show people the regard you would have them show yourself if you're in this role. It may seem trite, but the rudeness of people who are trying to squelch others as they're trying to communicate in an incredibly public forum is just amazing. Amazingly bad.
That was the end of Hawley's time. Let me mention a couple of things here. Again, Hawley only brings up basically two issues. Title IX women in boys' bathrooms, or boys in women's bathrooms, rather, playing the whole pretend, I'm this sex or I'm that sex kind of game. Which, again, it was a problem and it was getting out of hand, no doubt about it. And then, of course, the business of that connected to Title IX, as I just said, and then, anti-Semitism and that whole sweater knitting that anti-Semitism does with the lying and this, that, and the other. First of all, both subjects are low-hanging fruit. It's just headlines that exist in the news because this is the subject that is politically expedient for somebody like Senator Hawley. Same thing with anybody else. All you have to do when it comes to education is bring up Title IX and Jews. And if you bring up both of them, well, then you'll get all the votes you need. It's low-hanging fruit. And it's low-hanging fruit for people who really don't know the truth about any of those issues and what's really going on. Joke's on everybody. The perversions of Title IX are Jewish. Therein lies the entire problem. The reason you have the perversions in schools is because of the Jewish lobby. See the irony here? This is the problem this is the connection between those two issues that people don't understand, because it's the Jewish lobby wringing their hands from creating the problem and then the perception of the solution, because they're making money on implementing the problem, creating all of the chaos around the problem, and then they make money on proposing the solution because they're on that aspect of the entire equation also. But Hawley doesn't care because, again, he's selected and that's who he is and that's what he does. He doesn't bring up the business of corruption and corporate greed within American K-12 school districts. He doesn't even dive into any of that. There are endless issues he could have picked from, but these are just the two he picks from. So I've said this before regarding the business of Title IX. Keeping in mind, Title IX was brought forth by the Jewish lobby initially at its inception. Title IX was quite literally the first example of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, why is that the case? Because when Title IX first showed up, it was as if the law didn't exist. But the law did exist. The law was already designed to protect everybody, because that's what the law is supposed to do, regardless of race, religion, etc., etc. But when Title IX first showed up, much like DEI, if college campuses and American K-12 schools didn't comply, and the specific aspect of complying meant that you had to offer women the same opportunities that men were offered, specifically when it came to sport, then you could be violating rather the law, thereby be held accountable from a monetary standpoint or what have you. So when Title IX was first implemented, you had colleges and universities quite literally doing away with men in sports and male sports programs to accommodate the introduction of female-led sports. The guys would lose their soccer team, but the women would get a synchronized ice skating team. Because now we have an added female sport, so look, government, we're complying with Title IX. It sounds very similar to DEI, does it not? Because they're the same thing. And again, they were both brought forth by the Jewish lobby to make money on all ends of it, from a legal standpoint, an implementation standpoint. If anybody complains about it, there's the Jewish lobby to make more money off it also. If anybody complains about it, whines about it, or even supports it, don't worry, they'll be there too with their bucket of cash in order to just receive any kind of a kickback or further an agenda. Again, it's still two fingers on the same hand. That's all. It's the illusion of there being any kind of a difference. This is the scheming and the meddling that takes place that people don't even bother paying attention to. Why is it that this program shows up and then this one has to go away? Why is it now that these are going away and certain programs are coming back? People aren't asking who's pulling the strings and who's allowing for all of this to take place. Now, regarding Holly's, complaints about Jews being attacked at an unprecedented level on college campuses. It's happening at the most Marxist, communist institutions that existed in the United States. Columbia, Stanford, Yale, Harvard, specifically the ones on the East Coast by and large. Pretty much everybody in between, no one really cared. No one really cared. A few memos went out, a couple of people started walking around with a few more flags from time to time. Who cares? That's freedom of expression on all sides. They can do whatever they'd like. But what you can't do is you can't lie about your involvement, and you can't lie about what other people are doing or not doing in a particular situation. And when it comes to the business of lying about being the victim, I think we know who does that more than others. These are the same groups, again, that create, and by groups I of course mean the Jewish lobby and their funders and everybody else who has a financial stake in the entire matter, certainly colleges and universities because they're controlled by them. But these are the same individuals that, again, created these Bolshevik departments to anonymously complain against faculty members and students no matter what, that you're guilty before proven innocent. I've been over that at length before also. Those hit squads still exist on college campuses. And all this does, any future move regarding old anti-Semitism, all it does is it empowers those particular groups to double down on their behavior and their headhunting. And that can't happen because the Constitution is supposed to be for everybody who's a lawful citizen. But yeah, if you're a visa holder or a student visa holder and you break a law, you should have your visa revoked. I don't care if you steal a Snicker bar from a CVS. It doesn't matter. You broke the law. So, you have a visa? Oh, well, now you're out of the country. See how that works? Regardless of who steals the Snicker bar, you should be gone. Again, I agree with that. That should be a thing. That should happen. If you come here, you should follow our laws. If we're giving you the opportunity to be indoctrinated in our country, and that's something that you're interested in, well, you still have to follow the law. But what you don't get to do is set up a trap for those individuals based on lies and have them fall into it and then point at them and say, look what they were doing to us. We're the victims. They're the perpetrators. It's absolutely absurd. And all Holly's comments do is highlight that he's completely owned by the lobby. Okay, this next audio is Senator Kim, Asian man, Democrat, New Jersey, communist. That's about all you need to know. And in stereotypical fashion, he goes through again all of his concerns, his emotional concerns. He brings up old anti-Semitism again, this long-lost aunt that everybody apparently has. And then at the exact same time, he gets into the whole emotional aspect at the very end. I have kids and I'm friends with teachers and they're all scared. They're just scared. And that's all you're hearing, by the way, from the protesters who are standing up and screaming and shouting. They're so stupid. And some of them apparently are school teachers themselves. They're so stupid that they actually believe that the elimination of the Department of Education has something to do with their job. It doesn't. Unless, of course, the only thing you're doing is teaching perversion all day long, or you're in a DEI program and you're the director of their DEI, whatever, coordination of their curriculum within their school district, in which case, yeah, you're out of a job. And you should be. And after Kim's comments here, I'll read that memo in its entirety from the FDOE about how they have less than 2 weeks now to eliminate their DEI programs, at the K-12 and university levels or receive no federal funding. This is where all hell's going to break loose. Again, I've mentioned that before, but I'll get to that memo here in just a second. So here's Senator Kim and his emotional concerns, because again, he's a communist, in 3, 2, 1.
Now it is Senator Kim's turn.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming before us. I guess I just wanted to jump in. I've heard a couple of times you mentioned that you believe that Congress would need to be involved if there is an effort to abolish the Department of Education. That's right?
Correct.
Do you know if President Trump shares that sentiment?
I've heard President Trump recently, over the last couple of weeks, in conjunction with his fervor to shut down the bureaucracy of the Department of Education, he has also stated that he will work with Congress to make that happen.
Do you know if Elon Musk, have you had any conversations with him about the Department of Education?
I have not.
His team? Why I raise this is that, I just came from another hearing that was talking about foreign assistance, talking about USAID. USAID is another element of our federal government that was codified by Congress, and we see an effort there to dismantle it. Now, fully abolish it, but dismantle it basically down to about 600 people. Gut everything, put it under the State Department. So I guess I wanted to just ask you, if something like that was proposed by the Trump administration for the Department of Education, does that have to come to Congress?
Certainly there are departments that I believe that are in the Department of Education by statute, and those have to be looked at.
And
what
elements of the Department of Education are those that are protected by statute?
I believe IDEA is. I think Title I is. And I'd like to discuss that, look into it and discuss it more fully with you.
But for those that are not codified by statute, you're saying those are ones that the executive branch can do as they please? I
think that I would like to look into that more.
Why I kind of mentioned this as well is that, just in the first couple of weeks here, we had a lot of conversation about the surge of anti-Semitism, our strong support, and make sure protecting students from that type of harassment, from that type of intimidation, absolutely something we need to stand against in terms of anti-Semitism. But I guess I was alarmed because what we ended up seeing is that multiple attorneys and other staff members of the department's Office of Civil Rights have been placed on administrative leave with no notice, no explanation. And some of them were in the process of investigating cases directly related to anti-Semitic harassment. So I guess I wanted to just ask you, is that something you would support? Do you think that that's the right actions that we should be taking at this time that we see such a surge in anti-Semitism?
Well, Senator Kim, I know it's not a great comfort for me to say this morning that I am not yet confirmed and have not yet been in the department. I don't know about all the administrative people that have been put on leave. I want to look into that. I want to understand it. I want to assess the department. I can't do that unless I'm confirmed and I get there, but I would certainly be willing to come back to you with a more specific answer.
But does that concern you at all if you were confirmed? Would you make that a priority to go and see whether or not this is going to impact our ability to respond to anti-Semitism?
No, I would want to make sure that we have everything that we need to have in place to protect our students on campuses.
One thing that we have been having this debate on here in Congress is about this, and what we've seen is that Republicans have called for a 25% cut in the budget of the Office of Civil Rights. Is that something you would support?
again, I would want to see exactly what that impact is going to be and understand it.
Look, I guess I'm frustrated because I feel like this is such a clear place where we can just say, yes, we want to make sure we have as much resources as possible to be able to fight anti-Semitism, to make sure that we're addressing these needs of such a surge. When we see a surge in anti-Semitism, of course we would want a surge in resources to focus on that. So I just wanted to raise that because this whole debate that we're having right now, it feels like it's untethered from just the reality on the ground. And I just urge you, if you are confirmed, that we are understanding the human impact of the problems that are here. I have a second grader and a fourth grader. I got two little boys. And I just had their parent-teacher conference. And yes, we talked through the performance of my kids, the data that NAEP and others are used, the Institute for Education Sciences. Now we're seeing $900 million cuts to that coming out from Elon Musk and his team. But I just raised this is the reason why teachers are concerned right now is not about their own salaries and their own careers. When they talk to me, they talk about the kids. They talk about the kids. That's I find that to be so powerful when these teachers, they're saying, look, like, I'm not asking about my own career. I'm asking about the kids. So just as you proceed, just remember that. Parents are very scared right now. Now you'll bet.
Someone reproduced with him. Yuck. I don't get it. Guy looks like he's never done a push-up in his life. What a waste. First of all, you of course heard all the over-emotional nonsense there at the end. They're just scared. They're just scared. Well, then they're stupid because they don't know anything about the process. They don't know anything about government. They don't understand anything about crime, wasteful spending, social engineering, or anything else. Brainwashing. They know nothing about it. That's why they're off their rockers and losing their mind. When he says, again regarding anti-Semitism, when he brings that up and says, when we see a surge in anti-Semitism, shouldn't there be a surge in resources available to combat it? What he means by that, because he's a communist, is shouldn't we see more money go into money laundering programs so that individuals get kickbacks under the illusion of trying to diminish violence or hate or what have you, criticism of basically Jewish students or anybody else who opposes them. Again, that's all the word resources means. It just means money. Shouldn't there be more money and more task forces and more groups? And yes, there's going to be financial kickbacks and unethical behavior, and it's not really going to go to solving anything because the people claiming to solve the problem are also the same people creating the problem and then creating the money flow to, again, get all the kickbacks and the money laundering that takes place. But shouldn't we see more of that? And she just looks back at him and goes, everybody has the right to be safe on a college campus. Because it's that simple. It's not complicated. You don't need more money to combat anything. You don't need more people, positions, committees. If a law is being broken, you arrest the person breaking the law. That's not complicated. That's what a police force is for. If somebody lies about being harassed or someone lies about being assaulted, then you arrest the person after an investigation. You arrest the person lying about being assaulted or being harassed. That's all. Happens all the time. So again, regarding Donald Trump's executive order on, anti-Semitism and all of that nonsense, it basically is almost immediately neutered and extinguished, given the fact that he also signed another executive order having everything to do with anti-Christian bias. See what I mean? It's two separate and opposing religious executive orders, where one cannot have an impact on the other, but they cancel each other out. That's basically the best way that I can put it. An individual can't say, well, I'm being harassed because I'm Jewish. Anybody thinking clearly would have to say, prove it. And then the same is true if a Christian is being harassed. Someone says, well, we're being discriminated against because we're Christians. Someone would have to say, okay, prove it. And if they have no proof on either side, well, sorry, gang. The Constitution exists. Let's just go back to the Constitution. Oh, yeah, you're still going to have to prove it. You still have to prove that some wrongdoing has taken place. And if you're making it up, well, that's against the law then. So, again, I don't view those two executive orders as being a problem. Where this will get interesting is any religious influence based on another executive order that was signed where apparently in the White House there's going to be sort of a religious advisory committee having to do with what they deem to believe the best for Americans. I think that unfortunately it's inside of one of those committees where you're going to see groups who, I don't know, consistently use the term Judeo-Christian. And they try to blend these two things together, which we know are nowhere close to one another. So that entire Schofield Bible made-up phrase, all of that, again, is likely to be infiltrated within such a committee, unless, of course, that committee doesn't really go anywhere, and that advisory panel doesn't really go anywhere, and they just basically get housed inside of the White House and make it look like they're doing something. I mean, I really don't know. But if we start to see any major, I don't know, religious tension or fractioning existing on a purposeful level within American K-12 schools or college campuses that deviates from the already existing Constitution of the United States, then, we're going to have to look into that a little closer. But I don't know what's going to happen with it again in the short term or the long term. I'm not a fan of committees. I'm not a fan of religious leaders getting together and trying to determine what they think is best for the American people. It always seems a little nefarious to me. I think we as the people get to decide that. I don't think some interagency or inter-White House government commission gets to decide anything for us. We have free will. We can decide things for ourselves without their input and what they think is best for us. So there you go. Again, just listen to Jesus. He'll tell you what's okay and what isn't. Pretty simple. We don't need flesh and blood telling us. Okay, with that said, here's the DEI memo from the Federal Department of Education. Happy Valentine's Day, as this was written on and put out on February 14th. It says the following here: United States Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, the Acting Assistant Secretary, February 14th, 2025. Dear colleagues, quote, discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin is illegal and morally reprehensible. Accordingly, I write to clarify and reaffirm the non-discrimination obligations of schools and other entities that receive federal financial assistance from the United States Department of Education. It says this letter explains and reiterates existing legal requirements under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Equal Protections Clause of the United States Constitution, and other relevant authorities. Very quickly, just as a side note, one of the things and one of the reasons why this was put out was because the same day Donald Trump signed you're not going to receive any more federal funds for the COVID mandates in American schools or anywhere for that matter. So no more mask wearing, no more shot taking, and if you do any of those or you force any of that stuff, well, you're screwed. Which, by the way, talk about giving more rights to the American people, you already had them. And if you threw them away the first time, you shouldn't have done that, because there were those of us out here fighting for your rights, whether you knew you had them or not. Even so, the executive order forces a memo like this, which then forces a memo like this to go out to every single institution, and in this specific case, American schools. Now, you would think that all of this memo writing and executive order writing having to do with COVID and violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which applies to all of us, not just blacks, it applies to all Americans, that alone would be enough evidence to tell people, wait a minute, our rights were violated the first time, in 2020 and 2021 and all those mandates? You mean our rights were violated? Yeah, they certainly were. And they were violated, why? To get you to accept a lie. And you bought it, hook, line, and sinker. So you reap what you sow. But you should start asking questions about the lie that you all believe, because now it's all being reversed. It goes on here. Next paragraph, it says, quote, in recent years, American educational institutions have discriminated against students on the basis of race, including white and Asian students. See that? That's a big move. They said white people and Asian students. They normally never say that. It says many of whom come from disadvantaged backgrounds and low-income families. I like that sentence. Remember, normally it's blacks and Jews. I mean, it's normally them. They're the ones that are constantly being brought up as being discriminated against. Not so in this memo. Remember, Civil Rights Act of 1964 has to do with all of us. It goes on, it says, quote, these institutions' embrace of pervasive and repugnant race-based preferences and other forms of racial discrimination have emanated throughout every facet of academia. Who caused that? It says, for example, colleges, universities, and K-12 schools have routinely used race as a factor in admissions, financial aid, hiring, training, and other institutional programming. In a shameful echo of a darker period in this country's history, many American schools and universities even encourage segregation by race at graduation ceremonies and in dormitories and other facilities. Now, of course, side note, what's funny about that is there are still, of course, historically black colleges. Well, what if there were historically white colleges? What if those existed? What if those colleges only existed for whites? Seems like it would be a violation of the Civil Rights Act, but I mean, I understand why those colleges were started in the South for primarily black students. I fully get it. But again, if you're a white student and you attempt to apply because you happen to live close to one, are you going to get in? Probably not, because you're white. Seems like it's discrimination. Anyway, it goes on. It says educational institutions have toxically indoctrinated students with the false premise that the United States is built upon systemic and structural racism, quote unquote. And advanced discriminatory policies and practices. Proponents of these discriminatory practices have attempted to further justify them, particularly during the last 4 years, under the banner of, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, smuggling racial stereotypes and explicit race consciousness into everyday training, programming, and discipline. Again, who's responsible for that? Who created it? Out of thin air in a boardroom to make money on it? I think we know. It says, but under any banner, discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin has been, and will continue to be illegal. Yes. It says the Supreme Court's 2023 decision in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, SFFA, which clarified that the use of racial preferences in college admissions is unlawful, sets forth a framework of evaluating the use of race by state actors and entities covered by Title VI. The court explained that, quote, classifying and assigning students based on their race is lawful only if it satisfies strict scrutiny, quote unquote, which means that any use of race must be narrowly tailored, that is, necessary, to achieve a compelling interest. It says, to date, the Supreme Court has recognized only two interests as compelling in the context of race-based action. One, remediating specific identified instances of past discrimination that violated the Constitution or a statute. And two, avoiding imminent and serious risks to human safety in prisons, such as a race riot. It says nebulous concepts like race balancing and diversity are not compelling interests. As the court explained in SFFA, quote, an individual's race may never be used against him and may not operate as a stereotype in governmental decision-making, unquote. Well, then there goes all your anti-Semitism stuff. It says, although SFFA addressed admissions decisions, the Supreme Court's holding applies more broadly. At its core, the test is simple. If an educational institution treats a person of one race differently than it treats another person because of that person's race, the educational institution violates the law. Federal law thus prohibits covered entities, it says, from using race in decisions pertaining to admissions, hiring, promotion, compensation, financial aid, scholarships, prizes, administrative supports, discipline, housing, graduation ceremonies, and all other aspects of student, academic, and campus life. Put simply, educational institutions may neither separate or segregate students based on race, nor distribute benefits or burdens based on race. Here's what this means at the K-12 level. It means, and it should have happened from day one, why it didn't is beyond me, and you've heard me bring this up. But any time that a school board or a superintendent say, we're interested in hiring people of color, that violates the law. It violated the law then, the moment it came out of their mouths, and it violates the law now. It violates the Civil Rights Act. Every time they said it previously, they were breaking the law because they were saying whites need not apply. It's that simple. They're openly telling people that. We want to hire darker people. I can't believe that they actually said it when they said it. But this memo is saying you shouldn't have said it. And if you say it now, you're violating the law. Again, they were violating it then. But if they do it again going forward, they're violating it yet again. So they need to be called out and sued into the ground. It goes on here. It says, although some programs may appear neutral on their face, a closer look reveals that they are, in fact, motivated by racial considerations. A race-based decision-making, no matter the form, remains impermissible. For example, a school may not use students' personal essays, writing samples, participation in extracurriculars, or other cues as a means of determining or predicting a student's race and favoring or disfavoring such students. Again, assignments have to be specified now. Clubs, groups, activities, the whole thing. You can't discriminate against people. It says, again, the fact that this has to be said in our country should tell everybody the communist direction we were going in. It says relying on non-racial information as a proxy for race and making decisions based on that information violates the law. That is true whether the proxies are used to grant preferences to an individual basis or a systematic one. It says it would, for instance, be unlawful for an educational institution to eliminate standardized testing to achieve a desired racial balance or to increase racial diversity. That's all they've been doing. That's all that's been happening across the nation. I brought up those stories here on the show. They immediately eliminate the scores of blacks, or they eliminate the scores of whites and Asians because whites and Asians score higher, so then they change the entire test because they say it discriminates against blacks. It was a crime it was a crime at face value. It was a crime instantly. Anybody with 2 cents in their head could see that, but these people are lunatics. It goes on, it says, quote, other programs discriminate in less direct but equally insidious ways. DEI programs, for example, frequently preference certain racial groups and teach students that certain racial groups bear unique moral burdens and others do not. Such programs stigmatize students who belong to particular racial groups based on crude racial stereotypes. Yeah. It says, consequently, they deny students the ability to participate fully in the life of a school. Exactly. The discrimination for DEI with DEI goes both ways. It really discriminates against blacks. whether they know it or not. They think blacks are getting a hand up, when really they're not. They're getting kicked right between the legs. Because you're saying to them, you're not the same as everybody else. You're marginalized, and we want to marginalize you, and trust me, we'll help you because we're government. And on the other end, they look at whites, Asians, and anybody else, and they say, you're the problem. And you can't be a part of DEI programs because you're not dark enough. Well, that's against the law too. It was when it first showed up. It still is today. Again, the fact that this memo has to be written should tell people how far we've fallen. It goes on. It says the department will no longer tolerate the overt and covert racial discrimination that has become widespread in this nation's educational institutions. The law is clear. Treating students differently on the basis of race to achieve nebulous goals, such as diversity, racial balancing, social justice, or equity, is illegal under controlling Supreme Court precedent. It's also money laundering. It was also designed for that. It says all students are entitled to a school environment free from discrimination. The department is committed to ensuring those principles are a reality. This letter provides notice of the department's existing interpretation of federal law. Additional legal guidance will follow in due course. The department will vigorously enforce the law on equal terms as to all preschool, elementary, secondary, and post-secondary educational institutions, as well as state educational agencies, that receive financial assistance. Boom. That's a big boom. That means if you do it at the state level and you invite in NGOs and think tanks who are still DEI in their agenda, or any part of what it is that they plan on implementing even smells like a discriminatory program against anybody, you're screwed. And you can't allow them in or you're breaking the law. You can't even allow them to give a proposal in a school board meeting. Because if the proposal that they're going to give for some program that they want to implement for either teachers, students, or otherwise, if it even looks like it discriminates against anybody or gives a certain group of people a leg up as opposed to others, you can't have it. Remember the group that I brought up a long time ago? They spoke at a Westerville City School Board meeting in Central Ohio, and it was all trannies. It was all queers and trannies. And they showed up from this outside agency that lives in the same town. They have some house or something that's filled with confused trannies, which I know is redundant, and and everything else. But they actually came into the school board meeting and were invited in to give a presentation about how they need to change their professional development for teachers on word usage, to increase the pronoun usage, to increase the discipline of anybody who doesn't agree with the pronouns, and doesn't agree with the people who want to wear cat ears, and disagrees with anybody who doesn't want to play pretend. That alone was a discrimination program, because you're discriminating against people who have a brain in their skull. What this memo is saying is if you invite those groups in, you're violating the law. I absolutely love this. This is amazing. It goes on, it says the department intends to take appropriate measures to assess compliance with the applicable statutes and regulations based on the understanding embodied in this letter beginning no later than 14 days from today's date, which would be February 28th, including anti-discrimination requirements that are a condition of receiving federal funding. It says all educational institutions are advised to, 1, ensure that their policies and actions comply with existing civil rights law. None of them did. They all violated it, certainly in the last 5 years. Number 2, cease all efforts to circumvent prohibitions on the use of race by relying on proxies or other indirect means to accomplish such ends. Yes. Means get rid of all the language, get rid of all the games, the gimmicks, the nonsense, the queer flags, all of it, and the books. Time to burn the perverse books in the front lawn. Number 3, it says, cease all reliance on third-party contractors, clearinghouses, or aggregators that are being used by institutions in an effort to circumvent prohibited uses of race. Yes. That means book companies. That means, again, outside agencies, all of it. All those contracts are now void. I love it. Revenge is a dish best served cold. It's the law. It's always been the law. All people have seen over the last 5 years is how many people don't care about the law. It finishes up here. It says institutions that fail to comply with federal civil rights law may, consistent with applicable law, face potential loss of federal funding. Anyone who believes that a covered entity has unlawfully discriminated may file a complaint with OCR. Oh, I'll do that. It says information about filing a complaint with OCR, including a link to that online complaint form, is available here with a link. I'll put the link in the description below if anybody's interested. It says, thank you in advance for your commitment to providing our nation's students with an educational environment that is free of race, color, or national origin discrimination. Sincerely, Craig Traynor, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, United States Department of Education, unquote. Hallelujah. Again, I will link the website in the description below on the ed.gov/laws and policy/civil rights laws/file complaint website, which that's the web address. But I will link it in the description below because if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see an electronic complaint form and a PDF complaint form also. My recommendation is you start filling them out now. You already know what they've done. You already know what they're going to hide. My recommendation is you be very specific, leave no stone unturned, name names, name employees, name superintendents, school board members, etc., etc. Name all of them. School board administrators, teachers, whoever it is that's violating any of what you just heard there. My recommendation is you file complaints against them. It can be one complaint. It can be a different complaint per incident. It's completely up to you. But you just need to be thorough. What I'll also do is I'll create a link for this document on my website that I just read from, that memo. I will create I will basically put that into a PDF, and then I'll link it in the, Education Documents tab under my website at AmericanEducationFM.com. And you can print it out for yourself, and you can keep it on you if you're affiliated with these school districts, and then use it as a weapon for your defense. Again, if I had $1 for every time I've brought up the Civil Rights Act on this show, dating back to 2020 and 2021, I'd have bags of dollars. Everybody's rights were being violated back then, and they're still being violated to this day. So stand up for yourself. Use these documents to your advantage. You don't have to be a lawyer to use the law to your advantage. The law is there for all of us. You don't have to be a practicing lawyer to figure this out either. Speaking of the law and the state of Ohio, just a quick little note. Apparently, former OSU coach Jim Tressel is now the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio. They seem to be doing a pretty good job of, or at least a hard job of trying to keep Vivek Ramaswamy out of the state of Ohio. Which, frankly, Jim Tressel's dirty too, and so is Vivek Ramaswamy as far as I'm concerned, so I don't know. It could be possible that Ohio's heading in a bad direction either way. But with that aside, they've apparently made being gay and being stupid in Ohio schools against the law also, which I thoroughly enjoy. This was, let's see here, it was from OhioCapitalJournal.com, titled, Ohio Senate Passes Higher Ed Overhaul Bill less than a day after 8 hours of opponent testimony. It says Senate Bill 1 was passed by a 21-11 vote. All 9 Democrats and 2 Republicans, Bill Blessing and Tom Patton, voted against the bill. Here's what this article says. It says the Ohio Senate passed a controversial higher education bill that would overhaul the state's public universities during Wednesday's session, It says this came one day after more than 800 Ohioans submitted testimony against it. 14 people provided supporter testimony. It says the supporter of the bill called those numbers irrelevant. It says Ohio Senate Bill 1 was passed by a 21-11 vote, blah, 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 blah. It says, quote, this is needed reform to enhance and make higher education in Ohio better. Serino said, Senator Jerry Serino, Republican from Kirtland. Here's what's in the bill, apparently. It says Senate Bill 1 would ban diversity and inclusion efforts, prevent faculty from striking, set rules around classroom discussion, put diversity scholarships at risk, shorten university board of trustees terms from 9 years down to 6 years, and require students to take an American history course, among other things. It says regarding classroom discussion, it would set rules around topics involving controversial beliefs, quote unquote, such as climate policies, electoral policies, foreign policy, diversity and inclusion programs, immigration policy, marriage, or abortion. It says the bill stipulates classroom discussion allows students to reach their own conclusions about all controversial beliefs or policies and shall not seek to indoctrinate any social, political, or religious point of view, unquote. It says, quote, a lot of it is related to making sure that diversity of thought is practiced as a policy in our universities and community colleges, Serino said. Senate Bill 1 would affect Ohio's public universities and community colleges, not private universities. It says Senate Democrats tried to make several amendments to SB 1 during Wednesday's Senate session, but none of the amendments were adopted. Blah, 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 blah. Senate discussion. Bill does this, bill does that. Okay, that's basically it. So essentially, professors can't discriminate, and colleges and universities who are receiving public money can't discriminate. Again, why this has to be a law is beyond me, because it should have always been the law. But what it also does, of course, is it doesn't allow professors to basically cater their classes and universities to cater their course offerings in one singular direction, certainly if it's in a DEI direction. So that's good. As far as the controversial topics, quote unquote, everybody has freedom of speech. If you're in a history class, for example, and they want you to do a presentation on anything having to do with World War II, we'll say, there's nothing that can keep you, and certainly this law doesn't free you, doesn't discriminate against you, and it doesn't keep you from doing such a thing, but there's nothing saying that you can't give a presentation, excuse me, on how the Holocaust was fake. You could certainly do that, and I think that falls under this particular Senate bill also. Of course, it's a First Amendment to the Constitution, but hey, if a college or university is saying, pick a subject in this American history course having to do with World War II that we discussed at the college or university level, and you decide to do a presentation on that with plenty of evidence to back up your paper and your presentation and your position, then they can't discriminate against you. They can't say no, which is a good thing. So yeah, figure out what the truth is, present the truth, teach your fellow students if you want to do that, and there you go. This is how it should have always been. Now, let me mention this too, kind of moving into the jab-related stuff here and the jab portion of the show. As I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump has now prohibited federal funding for COVID-19 vaccine mandates in schools. Good. It should be all so-called mandates, and the word mandate does not mean mandatory. Joke's on everybody. But it says the following here just briefly. It says, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order to prohibit federal funding for COVID-19 vaccine mandates in schools. It bars federal funds from being used to support or subsidize an educational service agency, state education agency, local education agency, elementary school, secondary school, or institution of higher education that requires students to have received COVID-19 vaccination to attend in-person education programs. That alone should have people quivering as to what they did to take shots to keep their job or to go to school. An executive order just wiped it all out because it was illegal to begin with. Which means not only did you go along with the depopulation biological weapon program designed to wipe people out, but you violated your own laws and you forfeited your own rights. Again, Donald Trump didn't cause any of that. That was Joe Biden and the so-called deep state, or whatever other term you want to use. We know who it was, but there you have it. It says the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Health and Human Services must issue guidelines for compliance and provide a plan to end coercive COVID-19 vaccine mandates, including a report on non-compliant entities and a process for preventing federal funds from supporting educational entities that impose COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Again, even the administrators at the college, university, and K-12 level who went along with the COVID lie, they should be scared shitless right now for what they did and what they went along with. Wonder why your staff is all sick all the time? Wonder why Professor so-and-so died suddenly? Wonder why that kid had a heart attack in the middle of gym class or the middle of math class? These people are going to reap what they sow, and they already are. It says putting an end to government overreach. President Trump is committed to protecting personal freedoms and ensuring that America's education isn't conditioned on unnecessary government mandates. It says some schools and universities have recently enforced or continue to enforce COVID-19 vaccine mandates, making access to education contingent upon students' COVID-19 vaccination status. Never should have been the case. It was against the law to begin with. It says these mandates pressure students into making COVID-19 vaccine decisions based on government coercion, also a crime, rather than on their own informed choices. Studies consistently show that children and young adults have an incredibly low risk of developing a severe illness from COVID-19 because it doesn't exist. With COVID-19 vaccine mandates threatening educational opportunities for students, parents, and being forced into difficult position comply with a controversial mandate or risk their child's educational future. It wraps up here and it says again, promises made, promises kept. American students are not forced to choose between their education and their medical freedom. President Trump is fulfilling his campaign promise. I will not allow schools to impose COVID vaccine mandates. In President Trump's first week in office, he reinstated service members who were dismissed for refusing the COVID vaccine with full back pay and benefits. That alone should have everybody who took the shots quivering. And then finally, President Trump is a staunch advocate for parental rights, ensuring families have the primary role in shaping their children's educational journey, free from undue bureaucratic mandates, unquote. That's the job of parents first, not government. Again, all due respect, that's what parents should have been doing back in 2020 and 2021, is not going along with what government was telling them to do, but telling government to go F themselves and pound sand. We're pulling our children away from government to never return. Lots of parents did, and they're glad that they did because they've never gone back. But this is exactly what parents should have done from the start. Shouldn't take an executive order. Again, should never take an executive order. It's the people. It's we the people who have the rights here. We always have. Never forfeit them. Okay. Couple of headlines here. This is from WorldNet Daily. Confirmed DOGE fines $2.7 million in Medicare. Trillion. That's right, with a T. DOGE fines $2.7 trillion in Medicare Medicaid fraud sent to ineligible overseas recipients over recent years. I wonder who got that money. Here's another one from the Daily Mail. COVID now officially less deadly than seasonal flu. For the first time since 2020, COVID is now killing fewer people than flu across the United States, official figures show. It's because there was no COVID. There was just a more poisonous flu shot that people took in 2019. Again, if you want to throw this in somebody's face, I recommend the documentary Fluvid-19, put out by Sean Hibbler. It clearly points all of this out. Points out a lot of things, but it points out that they were manipulating the numbers between COVID and flu. Flu doesn't exist either. Joke's on everybody. But people, again, were getting sick from flu shots, believing that flu is real And they were getting sick from those shots in 2019 and saying, gee, wow, this is way worse than the flu. I can't, I don't understand why I'm so ill. Well, quit injecting yourself with stuff and you'll be fine. Again, there is no COVID. This headline proves it. This headline proves that there's no COVID and no flu. There's only poisonous shots. This right here is the fairy tale. It's being revealed in front of people's faces. They just can't read between the lines. Next headline, this is from Zero Hedge. FDA misled the judiciary about Pfizer's vaccine documents. Whoops. It says on December 6th of 2024, a federal judge ordered the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to release documents related to the emergency use authorization of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. These documents had been hidden from public view. This is the latest batch, by the way. You may recall that first giant release batch that occurred in the spring of 2022, where you had the infamous, whatever it was, 9 pages of single-spaced, 12-point font, side effects and or intentional effects as a result of taking the COVID shots and what they would do to people. And all of those massive disclosures, many of which I brought up on the show, and those, again, pre-trial studies that were taking place. Even that release back then wasn't the full release. So even Pfizer wasn't releasing everything that they had, which is why it's taken, again, another court release to prove that Pfizer was keeping this information from the FDA and vice versa. So that's good. Again, this is going to be coming out here sometime, hopefully, in the near future. And one last one. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Massive shakeup at NIH and CDC. Over 5,000 probationary employees fired in Friday's purge. Good. Empty offices is what we need here. Smaller government is what we need. And of course, we want RFK and his merry band of marauders to go right through the entire COVID lie, flu lie, vaccine lie, the whole thing, and get down to brass tacks. Again, instead of saying, and I like the diplomatic way in which he's doing it, he can't stand on a mountaintop and say, all vaccines are poison. No more vaccines across the board, because again, brainwashed people will flip out. What do you mean I can't inject my kid with this? What do you mean I can't inject myself with that? They'll all lose their minds. So you have to slow roll this. And how do you slow roll it? You slow roll it the same way that he told people when he was in the Oval Office with his acceptance speech, which was a great speech. But he openly said, we need to test vaccine safety. We need to redo the ways in which we test the safety. Now, what do you think that really means? When they start retesting the safety, they're not really having to retest anything. They're having to get rid of the fraud that caused the fraudulent testing in the first place. Everybody knows they're poison. Whether they're for your child, yourself, your grandmother, or your cat or dog. They're all poisonous because it's the same industry that creates the same poison for all of them, whether you have 2 legs or 4. So with that said, once they go back and they immediately take out all the fraud, what are you left with? You're left with the poison. And then you tell everybody all of the studies that have been conducted on vaccination have all been fraudulent because these vaccines are causing the problems that they're claiming that people have in the first place. Take, for example, measles. All these stories about measles outbreaks. Well, we saw more measles outbreaks the other day than we've ever seen in the last, 10 years. How many measles, quote-unquote, shots were you giving people? That's what causes measles. Being shed on. When you're a child and you're around other people who have had shots, yeah, you're going to break out in hives. A doctor's going to look at that and say, well, it's measles. And then they're going to say, well, did you take the measles shot? And some will say yes, and they'll still have the same symptoms. And then some parents will be asked, well, did they take the measles shot? And the kids, of course, haven't. And they'll say, well, now that they've had it, they don't need the shot, but we still recommend the shot even though they've had it already. That's the issue here that is the foundation of the entire corrupt medical system. Any name for a condition isn't that the condition exists as a standalone illness of some kind from something that's floating around in the air. The name is created because it is a symptom of being poisoned. It's a symptom of being shed on by the poisoned. Flu, COVID, mumps, measles, you name it, polio, all of it. It's just a name, a label, that's given to a symptom as a result of being poisoned. No one ever walked down the street, tripped and fell into a vat of measles. No one ever walked down the street and was chased by a giant cloud of flu. It doesn't work that way. You can get sprayed with DDT, though, and you'll end up with polio. But polio is what? Polio, the name, take the name out of it. You're sprayed with DDT, and then you end up with a central nervous system problem. And then they look at you and they go, oh, well, we'll call this polio. But what's the real cause? The real cause is DDT spraying. And then what do? Then they start giving people, quote unquote, polio shots. And then they become paralyzed. And then what? They go, well, you have polio. Yeah, but I took the polio shot. Well, polio's strong and you can still get it. See how the lie just works its way through common sense from time to time? Again, once this lid gets broken open as to how simple all of this actually is, people will flip out. But plenty of us out here already know this. These illnesses just have fictitious names that they're given, when really it's just a horrible symptom from being poisoned. So, ignore the names, stop taking the poison, and then stop being around people who have been poisoned, and you won't become ill. And then, of course, don't eat and drink poison. And then you really won't get ill. That's it. It really is that simple. Okay. Thus endeth the episode. Again, I will link that DOE memo and the link where you can obtain the PDF complaint form for all the districts that, of course, won't be complying. And I don't want them to comply. I really don't. I want them to violate the law. It's going to be fantastic. Anyway, I will link all of that in not only the description below, but I'll also have it under the education tab, the education documents tab, under my website at AmericanEducationFM.com. Thanks for listening. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.